Proverbs chapter 27 is our text. Hebrews chapter 10 will elaborate on that as we look at the idea of iron sharpening iron. Maybe you know these songs. Owner of a Lonely Heart. Mr. Lonely, that's a little bit older. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Or Eric Carmen's song, All by Myself. We know about those songs, and there's probably been times in our lives when we've sung those songs about loneliness. I'm aware as I was preparing today that loneliness is becoming a very serious public health issue. In fact, on the portal of the intranet at work this week, it was interesting. It caught my attention because I knew what I was preaching on today. There was a thing about surveys are showing how dangerous it is to be lonely and how important it was, to have friends and colleagues. Well, in January of this year, Britain actually appointed a minister for loneliness. And that person is charged with tackling what Prime Minister Theresa May called the sad reality of modern life. There was a report in 2017 in Great Britain from the Joe Cox Commission on Loneliness, and they said more than 9 million people in Britain, about 14% of the population, often or always feel lonely. And a business organization in Great Britain has said that that problem of loneliness costs UK employers up to $3.5 billion a year. And when the Prime Minister said, we're going to have a minister for loneliness, public health leaders said, yes, we need that. In recent decades, researchers have discovered that if you leave loneliness untreated, it is not only painful to you emotionally, it can have serious medical consequences. Studies have linked loneliness and social isolation to heart disease, cancer, depression, diabetes, and suicide. Vivek Murthy, a former United States Surgeon General, has written that loneliness and social isolation, listen to this, are associated with a reduction in lifespan similar to that caused by smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than that associated with obesity. So when I read that loneliness is more dangerous than obesity to lifespan, my takeaway from that was grab some friends and go to the buffet. But as I was studying this, I discovered that just in May of this year, Cigna released results from a national survey about the impact of loneliness in the United States. And they used the UCLA Loneliness Scale, which is a 20-item questionnaire that is frequently referenced as like the standard on how you gauge loneliness. And they scored, if you scored 43 or more, and I did not look up this particular test, but they surveyed 20,000 adults ages 18 and older. And here's what they discovered. 46% say they sometimes or always feel alone. 27% rarely or never feel as there are people who really understand them. 43% sometimes or always feel that their relationships are not meaningful. 20% report they rarely or never feel close to people, and only 18% feel that there are people they can talk to. Only 53% have meaningful in-person social interactions, such as an extended conversation with a friend or time with family on a daily basis. And this generation between 18 and 22 that they're calling Generation Z is the loneliness generation and claims to be in worse health than any of the other generations. So, us old timers, we say, well, of course, it's because of social media. But here's what they've discovered. Social media alone really isn't the predictor. Heavy users of social media, their loneliness scale is 43.5. People who never or rarely use social media, their loneliness scale is 41.7. So, it's easy to say, well, it's just because of Facebook. It's more than that. And here's what Cigna says in their summary statement. The findings reinforce the social nature of humans and the importance of having communities. More specifically, the survey showed that people who engage in frequent, meaningful, in-person interactions have much lower loneliness scales and report better health than those who rarely interact with others face to face. And my summary paragraph was, and God is up in heaven saying, you just now figured that out? You do remember that I'm the one who said it's not good for man to be alone, right? And you do realize I created the family, and you do realize I created the church to deal with these issues of loneliness and social isolation. Said that's why you have the family, that's why you have the church, and it's why Solomon says in our text this morning, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The Hebrew writer put it this way, chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Now, how do we do that? Not giving up meeting together. Social interaction, in-face interaction. Not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. What he's saying is that as time starts to wind down, it is becoming more and more important that you spend time together with your brothers and sisters in the family of God, encouraging one another toward love and good works. Because as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. When I stopped at that verse and felt like the Lord was saying you need to deal with that subject, I thought it was going to be simple. So, wow, okay, iron sharpens iron. What does that mean? I discovered it wasn't as simple as I thought it was. Because I've never sharpened iron, so I don't know. But I was researching. And in the course of my digging around, I found a blog by a lady named Sharon Miller. Her website is sheworships.com. Kind of has some interesting insights. But she mentioned that they had a guest speaker at their church talking about this verse, and she decided that she would do some more study on it. And she said, as I began looking into blacksmith tools, I discovered that there was one iron tool that was used to shape and sharpen a blade. It was a steel file. Whenever I used to read Proverbs 27:17, I had never imagined a metal file. I had pictured two blades shearing across one another to produce ever-increasing sharpness. To be more precise, I pictured one of those Japanese steakhouse chefs clanging his knives before cutting a shrimp tail in midair. But in reality, two blades cannot sharpen one another, at least not very well. The only way to sharpen an iron blade is to use a tool with a different edge or texture. And that's an important point, she says. Part of this verse means not uniformity, because a blade is sharpened by resistance. So the iron that sharpens iron must be a different tool. Knowing this, she writes, Proverbs 27:17 encourages me to surround myself with strong Christians who can sharpen me, as well as those who are different enough to shape me by means of friction. That is to say, I need friends whose wisdom, whose willingness to say difficult things, or whose different perspectives will provide the grit with which God can sand my dull edges. Oh, That's pretty profound. And so I keep digging into this, iron sharpening iron, and what does it take for iron to sharpen iron? More specifically, what does it take in our interpersonal relationships that we sharpen one another? And I started off thinking, well, this is true for Christians, and it is, but it's true whether you're a believer or not. You just happen to be watching today. This is true if you want people in your life to develop you and sharpen you. It takes three things. First, it takes presence, Presence, relationship. The Bible term is fellowship. In other words, I might have a dull knife and I might have the best sharpener in the business, but if they never come in contact with each other, that knife is never going to get sharpened. A knife is not sharpened until it's in contact with the sharpener, right? We've got some dull knives, and we do have a sharpener, but the sharpener has never come in contact with the blade, and so the knife continues to be dull because it just doesn't happen by osmosis. As humans, there is a degree of sharpening that you can achieve at a distance. I thank God, for books, for teaching tapes, for pastors and leaders who put their teachings online, on television, on the radio. There's an awful lot of resources out there that when I started in ministry was not available, and I'm grateful for them. But there is a limit to how much sharpening can be done at a distance. Because if you're going to be sharpened as God intended, there must be fellowship. There must be relationship. There must be contact. Now, that online preacher or that TV preacher, he'll let you send him money. And he'll send you a letter that he sends out to everybody else saying, I'm praying for you today, and if you'll send me some extra money, God has promised he's going to do something for you. But that online preacher doesn't know you. He doesn't know that your children don't have confidence in your Christianity. He doesn't know that you and your spouse are barely coexisting. He doesn't know the lousy reputation you have in the community. So there is a limit to the sharpening he can do. And by the way, as a pastor who's been pastoring for over 40 years now, I have learned that one of the reasons people go from church to church to church to church is because once people in one church get to know them, it becomes a little uncomfortable. And so it's better to go somewhere where they don't know you and start over. And a lot of people do that about every 18 months, because, they got to know some things about me I didn't want to know. But from the very beginning, God said it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper for him. He created the church. And one of the things, if you'll study the New Testament, repeatedly he says, one another, love one another, care for one another, pray for one another, bear one another's burdens, relationship, fellowship, presence. We need people present face to face in our lives to sharpen us, to strengthen us, to encourage us, to support us, to knock off some of the rough edges. It takes place best in the context of fellowship. I heard a story from a missionary about a village that he was at for a while where the Christians, and there were a nice congregation of Christians there, but they had a habit, because they lived in very small homes, to walk out to the woods behind their homes to pray. And they would each kind of have a little private place back there, under a tree somewhere where they would read the Bible and pray. And over time, a path wore, because, what it's like when you walk the same place, back and forth to the mailbox, after a while the grass stops growing and you got a path there. And he said one day, he was beginning to realize that one of the particular people in the community had not been really as faithful in church and as, what we call backsliding. And he said as he was walking through the community, he heard that man's neighbor say to him, "Friend, I've noticed that the grass is growing on your path." That's people sharpening one another in the context of fellowship and relationship. So it takes presence. The second thing it takes is process. It takes time. They did not have electric sharpeners in Solomon's day. If iron was going to sharpen iron, it took persistence and it took time. It took more than a couple of seconds to sharpen that blade. And the same thing is true for us. Now, it is true that sometimes God can use one sentence, or one interaction to kind of wake us up and change the course of our lives. But typically, people sharpen one another over time, through years of friendship and relationship and fellowship. Because you learn things in year 5 that you didn't know in year 1. I remember hiring a guy on our staff at a church I pastored. And he had 10 years experience, and we thought, this guy's really going to know what he's doing. It's going to be great. And about a year and a half into his tenure with us, he started making some really, really bad decisions. What in the world is happening here? Does he not realize the long-term effect of what he's doing right now? And I do not remember who this person is. I wish I remembered who she was. She was apparently up in the hierarchy of our organization, because I called her for some advice. And I said, man, I don't know what's going on. He's just really messing up here. And I said, and he's got 10 years experience. You'd think he would know better. And she said, well, dig out his resume and look at it again. And I got to it and opened it up. And she said, in those 10 years, how many jobs has he had? And I looked, and he had been in those 10 years at 5 different jobs. And she said, see, Ken, he does not have 10 years experience. He has 2 years experience that he has repeated 5 different times. Right? Because those of you who are married, you learn things in year 5 of marriage and year 10 of marriage and year 20 of marriage that you didn't learn the first 6 months of marriage. When you have children, you learn things when they hit 18 months old that you didn't know when they were 6 months old. And you learn things when they hit puberty that you didn't know when they were still an infant. It takes time. And so it is in our spiritual development. The best growth takes place over time with the same group of people who know you. Because let's face it, if you hang around people long enough, you get to see them in their ups and their downs. You get to walk with them and see how they handle success. You get to walk with them and see how they handle failure. You get to walk with them and see how they handle heartache and heartbreak. Over time, that's what it takes. And so it's important for us to understand that process is important in our development as people. It takes time. And as we share life together, we are able to sharpen one another and encourage one another. I pray desperately, please God, I pray that you know things now about the Lord that you didn't know when you first started coming to Open Door. I pray that your development in Him has gotten deeper and more mature over time as we've experienced life together, as you have watched God in our lives, in the life of our congregation, sharpening one another, encouraging one another. And so I stuck in your notes, sharpening takes time. Don't give up on one another. It might take a little longer for some of us blades to get sharper than it does others. It takes time. Don't give up. You need presence, you need process, and for people to sharpen people, you need people. You've got to have the right people in your life, the right sharpeners in your life. Now, it was interesting what the sheworships.com blog writer, Ms. Miller, said, that you need people in your life to sharpen you who are different than you. Because if your blade is the exact same as their blade, nothing gets sharpened. And so we need people in our lives who think a little differently than we do. And if you have a job out in the world, you're surrounded by people who think differently than you do. But beware of the human tendency to only surround ourselves with people who like the same music we do, who think the same things we do, who have the same backgrounds we do, because that's comfort, but a lot of times it doesn't give sharpening. Sometimes I'll be listening, at work, and I'll hear things like, I need to think about things, maybe from that perspective, or I need to look at things that way. And it helps me not get too comfortable. That's one of the things I like about this church, is that, y'all don't let me get by with stuff. We understand, no, let's be real and let's be raw and let's be honest. That's why our little tagline is real, practical church, because we do our best to be real and honest here about the struggles and the sharpening that we have to go through as people. Now, as we talk about the people in our life to sharpen us, please realize not everybody's a sharpener. Some people dull you. They don't sharpen you, they dull you. They make you less effective. They increase the stress in your life. They don't resolve problems for you, they create problems for you. When you spend time with them, you leave them less than you were when you got there, because they've drained you of all of your energy. They have created more problems for you. They've created more stress for you. You know those people, that the longer you're around them, the more they're letting you try to handle more of their problems, and the more they're dumping on you more of their responsibilities, and over time they just take the edge off of you and they dull you. I was reflecting on this last night as I was trying to get to sleep. See, I might preach y'all to sleep, but I preach me awake at night, and that's rough. But I was reflecting on this, and I realized that instinctively I know this. Over time I have learned. And quite honestly, and this is a bad confession to make, especially online, but quite honestly, there are times at work when I see certain people and I make it a point not to go down the area where they are, because I know I'm worn out. I don't have anything more to give. And I know that if they catch me, they are going to sap the last ounce of psychic, spiritual, emotional energy that I have. And I, some days, intentionally avoid them if I can. So I guess what that means is the next time I see you at the grocery store and I head down the other way, you'll know you're one of them people. No, you'll just know I'm having a bad day. But that's true. You do the same thing. You just are holier than I am and you won't confess it. But that's true. There are just days where you say, I just can't handle it today. I don't need to put myself in that situation today. That's a realization that I'm dull enough right now. I don't need any more dulling going on in my life. I need some sharpening going on in my life. And I think that the first time I saw this breakdown of people was from John Maxwell. I'm not sure, but it's a pretty common breakdown of people in organizations, in businesses, in churches, in families, different kinds of people. There are very resourceful people. They ignite your spiritual passion. They set you on fire, man. They inspire you. They challenge you to grow. They encourage you in your ministry. They're always making a positive contribution. They're sharpeners. They ignite your spiritual passion. Then there are very important people who share your spiritual passion. Those are your teammates. Those are your colleagues. Those are your close friends who live life alongside of you, who minister alongside of you. They share your passion. Very important people. Then there are very teachable or trainable people. They catch your spiritual passion. They want to grow. They want to improve. They want to get better, and they're willing to learn. They catch your passion. Here's where you start getting into trouble with the very nice people. They enjoy your spiritual passion. They don't want to share in the ministry. They want to benefit from the ministry. They'll pat you on the back and talk about how wonderful you are, but they are always on the taking end. And over time, they will exhaust you because all they want to do is take from you. Teach me more. Do more for me. Show me more. And it's always, they always do it in a context of, oh, I learned so much from you, but they never give. It's always taking. And then there are the very draining people who sap your spiritual passion. You've got to be careful because, again, if you hang around too many very draining people, you will be drained, and you will wonder, why am I so weary? What has happened to my spiritual dynamism? And you think, oh yeah, they took it all away. So just be careful about who you allow in your life. The people that you spend the most time with, do they sharpen you or do they dull you? Choose your sharpeners wisely. Choose them carefully. And be grateful for the people in your life that God has placed there over the years who have sharpened you. You can probably think back to people in your lives that were there for a season in your life who taught you something, who equipped you with something, who challenged you with something, who really still are impacting your life, even though maybe you've not seen them in decades, because of the time that you had and iron was sharpening iron. But then I want to ask, are you a good sharpener? Are people better because you're in their life? After you spend time with them, do they leave encouraged and uplifted and challenged and motivated? Or do they leave dull and listless and lifeless and worn down? Now, as we get older, we have responsibility at times for people that are going to dull us, which becomes more essential that we make sure that we have some sharpeners in our lives. Some people in our lives that after we leave them, there's a pep in our step, there's a little bit of a smile on our face, we feel a little peace inside because we've been around them. Let's be good sharpeners. Let's be the kind of people so that when people are around us, they get better. Not only do they feel better, they actually become better people. They're more challenged to do better. They're motivated to do better. They're uplifted and they're sharpened. And a knife that is sharp is much more effective. So let's be good sharpeners. And let's be careful who we allow to rub up against us on a consistent basis. Do they sharpen you or do they dull you? Iron sharpens iron. One person sharpens another. Let me read that passage from Hebrews again. Let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some is in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Father, you created fellowship. You created relationship. And you did it so that we could be more effective. You've told us consistently through your word, two can do more than one. And we just understand that. And I thank you for the people that you've put in my life through the years who have been instrumental in sharpening my edge. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us to be people who are sharpeners. Help us to be people who encourage one another to love and good deeds. We're surrounded in this world by discouragement. Many of us, Lord, are carrying heavy burdens, and we have responsibilities that are draining. And so I pray that you would help us to make sure that we find people who will also sharpen us and encourage us and uplift us. We have so many people in our lives that drain us. Help us to find some people who will refill us and recharge us and reinvigorate us. Lord, we know that comes from you, but it also comes from your people. So may we develop, Lord, in this congregation and beyond, people in our lives who constantly are helping us and motivating us to get better, to love you more, to serve you more effectively, to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today. Go sharpen somebody.